To rise to the occasion is to perform better than we thought we would or could in the midst of challenge or pressure, often surprising not only others, but ourselves. In the first round of March Madness, the number 16 team, University of Maryland, Baltimore, defied all the odds, didn't they? By defeating number 1 team, Virginia, by 20 points. Out of the gate, UMBC went on an 8-1 run to establish a 7-point lead. And the point guard said, at that moment, we started believing in ourselves. It gave us the confidence that we could do this. Now, UMBC went on to lose their next game, but on March 16th, they rose to the occasion, making history. To rise to the occasion is also to show skill or strength we didn't necessarily know that we had until a difficult situation called it out of us. 20-year-old Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist for girls' education and the world's youngest Nobel laureate, visited her hometown yesterday for the first time since the Taliban attempted to assassinate her in 2012 when she was riding home from school. Rather than be defeated and slink into the shadows after she was shot down, Malala rose up with an even louder voice to continue her campaign for educating women and girls in Pakistan. She has risen to the occasion not just once, but over and over and over again, in the midst of support from some and outright opposition from others. When is the last time that you rose to the occasion? Was it the winning shot in an overtime game? Was it hitting all the notes in a live performance? Was it nailing a job interview or closing the deal in a presentation to a key client? Was it hosting a huge party without a single mishap or flaw? Was it being the most creative in your prom proposal? Was it telling your family a truth about yourself that perhaps you've been hiding? Was it defying odds to overcome a diagnosis or a prognosis? Or was it simply maybe getting out of bed in the days following the death of one you dearly loved? You know, sometimes we prepare for weeks knowing we have to pull out all the stops and rise to the occasion. Other times we don't even know we're rising to an occasion until it's over and done with. And we realize that we just did something we never thought we could do. On Easter Sunday, I suppose it is obvious to say that Jesus rose to the occasion. No one believed him when he said it, but he did indeed say that he was going to rise from the dead on the 3rd day, and he did. I don't want to downplay this because it is pretty miraculous. It is the reason that we are here this morning. It's the reason that we can proclaim that life has defeated death and that hope has the final word. The resurrection is the heart of our faith. It is the key to our salvation or our wholeness. The fact that Jesus rose from the dead is what actually made people remember him and write down his life's events so that we could one day know this man and in turn know God's deep, unconditional love for us. But not to steal his thunder, Jesus wasn't the only one that rose to the occasion that day. Even before the sun had risen on that first Easter morning, the people who were closest to Jesus were rising to the occasion too, even before they knew it was any kind of significant occasion at all. Mary arose out of her grief-stricken, sleepless night and made her way to the tomb. She saw that the stone had been removed, and so she assumed Jesus wasn't there. So all of a sudden, her grief took a back seat, and panic started to arise within her. And she ran back to tell two friends, Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved. We don't know for sure whether or not this was John, but for the sake of this sermon, we're going to call him John. Now, these two guys woke up with a start and took off racing. John ran the fastest. He gets to the tomb first and peeks in, but doesn't go in. He is eager but hesitant at the same time. Simon Peter, on the other hand, has guts. He goes into the tomb without a second thought. Would you walk into a tomb where you thought a dead person was or had been? Simon Peter doesn't shy away from this spooky, unsettling mystery. He leads his friends in facing their fears head on. And because of his leading, John then goes into the tomb, and John, the eager one, turns out to be the most enthusiastic one too, for going into the empty tomb led him to belief. So John is like your friend, you know the one who was first to jump on the bandwagon, but who is still really a follower at heart. It doesn't take much for him to believe. He's eager to believe, but he needs someone else to walk into the tomb first. And then because someone else did it, he can do it too. Simon Peter is like your friend who has guts, the one who is up for anything and dives headfirst into any adventure. This is the friend whose courage is contagious. Simon Peter is the leader that gets everyone else fired up and excited. Even if he himself still has questions on the inside, he doesn't show it on the outside. Both of these men rise to the occasion of Easter, but in different ways, and they need each other. Simon Peter would not have gotten to the tomb without his friend's enthusiasm and eagerness, and John would not have believed without his friend's courage and bravery. Indeed, we see that these friends cannot rise to the occasion without one another. And this is even true for Mary. First, her grief wakes her up, then her fear rises up, and then, sitting by the tomb alone, her tears well up. And as she weeps, Mary peeks into the tomb, and poof, all of a sudden, there are two angels there. Do you have friends like that, who just seem to show up at the right time, or call at the right time, or say the right thing at the right time? You don't even know how they knew that you needed them, but they're there. That's what these angels are to Mary. They are the quiet friends who rise to the occasion, not in some flashy way, but in a reassuring, ever-present way. And here in this tender moment with these two angels who appear out of nowhere at just the right time, we see Mary rise to the occasion. Because when they ask her why she is weeping, she doesn't shut down or close off. She's not embarrassed by her grief. She wears her heart on her sleeve and tells the two angels of her sadness. They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where he is. She tells the truth of her heart. How many of us do that with such readiness and ease? Mary lets the angels into her feelings, and it is perhaps that tender and vulnerable encounter that prepares her for the conversation that will change everything. The encounter she has with the risen Christ, who, of course, she thinks is a gardener at first. She opens up to this man as well, letting her protective love rise up in these words that express a deep plea. Sir, if you have carried him away, just tell me where you have laid him so I can go and get him. Then comes the word that raises Mary's eyes to see who was really before her. In this key moment, Jesus doesn't give some big theological statement about how he is the risen Christ and has come back from the dead just as he proclaimed that he would. No, he just says her name, Mary. Jesus has risen from the grave, yes. But in my mind, what makes him really rise to the occasion on this day is that he meets Mary where she is and simply says her name. He puts relationality above theology and above I told you so's and didn't you know. And he did this his whole life and his whole ministry. This is not to say that God was not making a theological statement through the resurrection. But when the actual moment of revelation of the risen Christ came, Jesus' relationship with Mary, his care for her, is what prevailed. Saying Mary's name is the first resulting act of resurrection because it pulls Mary up out of her grief and into the awareness of the miracle before her eyes, of the new life that is not just standing before her in Jesus, but the new life that she will now have because of this good news. As dawn breaks, it dawns on Mary that her life will never be the same because of the risen Christ. Ironically, perhaps this relational moment is what leads to the first theological statement of Easter morning, and it comes from Mary, not Jesus. She runs back to her friends and says, God doesn't leave any of us out. Jesus will keep rising up until our eyes and hearts raise up and see Jesus ourselves and proclaim as Mary did, I have seen the Lord. So yes, Easter Sunday is the celebration of all celebrations. The resurrection is what compels us to share the good news about God's redeeming and sustaining love at work in the world. That not all is lost, that hope lives, that life has defeated death. This is all true. Easter is the occasion of all occasions, and Jesus rose to it. But Easter was also a dark morning of grief and fear and questioning before it was ever an occasion for celebration. So if you are one for whom belief does not come quickly, or for whom questions abound, if you are one that is buried in grief today, who can't see the light shining in the darkness, then remember that Easter morning was dark. It had been a long weekend full of violence and betrayal and denial and frustration and accusations and suffering and loss. And on that dark Easter morning, an event happened. Christ arose from the grave and appeared to his friends who needed to see him in order for them to arise out of their grief and fear and believe and hope in life again. Perhaps rather than celebrating Easter Sunday as a special occasion, what if we thought of Easter as the moment that turns all other moments in our lives into occasions worth celebrating? Because the resurrection changes everything. It means that the worst thing in our life is not the last thing. It means that we should be celebrating a whole heck of a lot more in our lives. Following Jesus is not about special occasions like Christmas and Easter. It's about realizing that all the ordinary days in our lives are special occasions because we have life to begin with, here and in the hereafter. Episcopal priest Phillips Brooks preached, "Let every man and woman catch the revelation of Jesus and his resurrection. Let them say not merely Christ is risen, but I shall rise." If you never thought you could be or would be one to proclaim that you have seen the Lord? Then think again. Easter proves that God loves to surprise us and that we can, all of us, rise to the occasion no matter who we are. So don't be fooled. The resurrection is not a joke, and hope is not a hoax. Christ arose on Easter so that we could rise up every other day of our lives. Christ is risen. Are you? Amen.